Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to discuss some aspect of scientific writing, and particularly from my personal perspectives as a professor, as an author, a reviewer, and also a journal editor, and through my interactions with the students, authors, referees, and publisher. And also this presentation reflects some views of the publication policy of American Geophysical Union, AGU, and also this presentation contains a lot of inputs from our experts from AGU on some common problems, mistakes that the authors may have that may cause delay in publishing their research work. So when you start thinking about publishing your research, there are two very important considerations you need to give when you try to figure out where you want to publish your study, and that is the nature of your own research work, and also the scope of the journal that you intended to publish. So if this two doesn't match, and it's going to be very, very hard for you to get your paper published. And a lot of times submitting to a wrong journal can cause significant delay in publishing your research. And a lot of us, I mean, we do hard research, we do some good research, and we always think, hey, my research is very important, and I like to get my papers published in high-profile journals such as Nature or Science. But probably not all of us know that Nature or Science rejects about 90% submissions without even peer review. And the problem for that is that they have very, very high standard for publication. And does anybody know what are the publication standards for Nature or Science? Okay, I think first it has to represent a major breakthrough in the field. And number two, it has to be of broad interest. So if your paper doesn't satisfy those two criteria, most likely your paper will not publish in Nature or Science. I'm an editor for the journal JGR Atmospheres. So that's our criteria to publish papers. So JGR Atmospheres publishes papers representing important advances in the understanding of atmospheric, physical, and chemical processes. A lot of times we send paper back without peer review because those papers do not satisfy the scope doesn't meet the scope of our journal. And you can always find out the scope of journal by going to the journal website. The other thing when you're writing papers, it's always very important to follow closely the journal style and guidelines, which most of those you can find from the publisher's website. And AGU has a very good website for author guide and information. So go to those websites to find out what are styles and guidelines when you're preparing your article. And sometimes publishers also provides a template, so you need to fit your paper into this template. And the other thing I like to mention is that so whenever you have multiple authors, you have a lot of collaborators writing papers together, it is very important that prior to publication you need to have an agreement from all authors that they are willing to publish this paper. What I normally do is I try to get some helpful comments from my co-authors, but I don't want them actually hold on in delaying my submission of my paper. I just send them an email. I say, hey, my paper, basically the paper is ready, and you are co-author, and I would appreciate to receive your comments. I set up deadline, and so if you please send me back your comments by this deadline, and if I don't receive it by this deadline, I would assume that you agree with the current content of the article. So in that case, they understand clearly that they are obligated to look into to give you comments. Another thing is that if the paper, a lot of times different sections are written by different authors, and you want to make sure that there's one single person in charge to check out the entire paper for clarity and also for consistency of the use of language. And also, you want to make sure that everything gets checked before submitting to the journal, including any supporting material. Okay, when you think about writing articles, there are four very critical elements, and which are listed here. So one's structure, grammar, clarities, and format. And those are the four most important elements that you need to consider when you're writing up your paper. A structure basically is how you configure your papers. So how different materials, where the different materials can be placed at, and also how the different contents are connected to each other. And the grammar basically is the rules of the language that everybody has to obey. And clarity is that when you write up your paper, you want to make sure that others understand what you're writing for. So a lot of times, if the writing is not clear, it's confusing, and it's very, very hard for people to understand what kind of message you try to deliver. And format can be very important when you try to improve the readability and particularly reviewability of your article. And some other thing also to consider is that you need to follow scientific writing. And so scientific writing actually differs significantly from oral presentations and those from news stories and books. I think the most important principle in scientific writing is need to be objective, but not subjective. Let me give you some examples here. So when you write, and one should always avoid use colorful, emotional, or offensive phrases or words, and those words are subjective writing. And also, I think when you write scientific articles, it's not a good practice to repeatedly use adverbs to modify adjectives. Let me give you some examples here. Okay, people like to write extremely fast, incredibly slow, or amazingly clear. And the point is that you cannot tell any distinction between distinction between fast, slow, clear versus extremely fast, incredibly slow, or amazingly clear without a definition. Okay. And also, let me give you some examples and poor examples. Some examples of poor scientific writing. And quote: "The study doesn't make much sense because it doesn't provide much details of the story." End quote. And that's not good scientific writing. Instead, I will recommend people to write that to replace the sentences that that study is inconclusive because lacking of evidence. And there's another writing here, quote, "This is an excellent paper by introducing a new theory, and it completely turns things around," unquote. And instead, we recommend the author to change the sentence slightly. So that study suggests an alternative theory in contrast to the conventional views. So I would agree the most important element for scientific writing from any other writing has to be objective, not subjective. Any tricks about how to improve your ability to do scientific writing? I don't think there's much tricks, but I think the bottom line is you need to read more and you need to write more. And a lot of times for writers whose English is not native language, and it would be very useful to actually have a native English speaker to check out everything, if all as possible. But now I'm going to actually talk about some of those elements here. Structure. So how people actually have a good structure about their publication. So basically, a scientific article always include those different components. Okay, it need to have an abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusions. So this is a typical structure for any scientific paper. Of course, there need to be a title for your article. And so when you're thinking about the title for your article, an article you need to avoid title that is wordy and overly long. And so the simpler is better. Use few words as possible to characterize your article. And here I give you some bad examples. The words people use in the title. They call their paper as an investigation of, a study of, or a discussion of. And the point is that so all research is an investigation, and all research is a study, and all papers contain discussions. So those words don't help you much. So the bottom line is that the titles need to be concise and informative. So all you want to do is to use a few words to describe what your study is about. Very short and informative. And there's some tip about writing abstract. I don't think I ever can overemphasize the importance of the abstract. And I think those days, scientists, researchers are evaluated by their scientific accomplishment. And what people normally do is they look at how popular the papers you have written for, how popular are those papers you have written up, and also what are the citations to your publication. And for me, the first thing I'm going to read for an article is the abstract. Okay, if I find this abstract interesting, I'm going to follow up with the conclusion, results, discussion, everything. And if the abstract is not poorly written, I have a hard time to understand the abstract, I'm probably not going to read this article. And if I don't read the article, I'm probably not going to reference the article. So I'm not going to cite it. So a good, clearly written article is extremely important. It's most important than anything else. So here are some tricks about writing good abstract. So it cannot be too long, and I should summarize it. So avoid an abstract that is too long and does not summarize the article. So abstract should describe the essence of the paper without giving every detail. So in the abstract, you need to include why the study was done, what and how it was done, what was found, and what was concluded. And also in the abstract, always try to avoid using abbreviations or jargons. And you can do those in the text, but not in abstract. It's not a good idea to do it. And for a typical research article, the length of the abstract should not more than 250 words. So it should be shorter. And this is what I normally tell my students about writing the abstract. So the abstract will include a brief motivation of your study. So why you're doing this? And also include the methodology you used. So how you actually perform this research. And also what are the major findings from this, the most important findings that you want people to know. And also maybe a sentence or two of the significance of your work. So how significant is this research? And also the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about here is the introduction. So the introduction provides an overview of the subject areas you're writing for. It should include a discussion of the current understanding of the field, the different series, and what has been done, and who has done what, and using what method. You should also include a discussion of the current outstanding issues and uncertainties on the subject. So what are some of the conflicting issues on the subject? And finally, you need to provide a paragraph about your own research here. So at the end of the introduction, you say, in this paper, and this is what we intended to do, and with whatever methodology. In the results section, so basically scientific papers, you have tables, you have figures that you like to present. So in the results section, basically what you need to do is to go through all the figures and tables and to discuss the details of each of this. And it is also very important that you actually connect all the pieces of your results to provide a coherent picture. So not just only discussing the individual figures, you need to get everything connected so people have an overall picture regarding your research. And that's all you do in the results section. And in the discussion section, so what you need to do is you need to emphasize on the implication of your results. And how your results contribute to knowledge in this area, and particularly in the context of current literature. So compared to the current understanding how your knowledge advance, how your study advance science. And what new method, series, mechanism being developed, produced from your study. And one thing I'd like to emphasize here is that in the discussion session, it's not a good idea to present an excessive overview of the literature. Okay, if you're going to do that, if you're going to do overviews and literature review, it's better to put most of those information there, but not in the results and in the discussion session. Okay, so it's not a good idea to have excessive literature review in the discussion session. About conclusion, so I always thought the conclusion section just extended after. Okay, so basically there you need to include in conclusion. So I use this method to investigate these problems. I need to mention all of the findings in my study. So what are the findings of my study? And also the significance of my research. The conclusion section should summarize the low and high, all the low and high points of your study, and what are the limitations and uncertainties in your study, and what are the improvements of your work, in particular, what scientific problems solve. And also in the conclusion section, it's very useful actually to point out some future directions of studies. So what future areas might be useful to further advance knowledge in that subject areas. And so those are each of the what you should actually put into each of those sections. And particularly when you're writing papers in terms of the consideration of structuring, and you need to know that your paper should be well organized and structured so that each section logically leads to the next. So I always tell my students that when you write the next paragraph or next sections, think about the last sentence, how the last sentence can actually lead to the next paragraph or next section. And this is basically how everything can be connected logically. And that's very important when you're considering the structure of your article. So the next I'm going to talk about here is the grammar. As I mentioned, grammar are the rules of language that everybody has to obey. And there's just too many issues that I can't go through all of them, but I like to point out some of the very common problems in terms of grammar. Number one, and you have to keep in mind, you always write in complete sentences. And a complete sentences means that each sentence should have a subject, and that is the, whom, or what. And also the sentence needs to have a predicate, and that's an action or occurrence. Okay. And if a sentence doesn't have a subject or predicate, it's not a complete sentence. A scientific writing always have to be a complete, use complete sentences. And the other common problem that we, the copy editing commonly encounter are punctuations, like at what time people should use commas versus semicolons. And here are a couple of tips here. Okay, so you only use a comma to separate two complete sentences connected by a conjunction. Those conjunction and, but, or, for, nor, so, or, yet. Okay, you have two complete two complete sentences, and they are connected by a conjunction. And in that case, you need to put a comma. And here's one example here. So the system rapidly went to a turbulent state, and the vortices was gradually distracted. So here we got two complete. So here we got the two complete sentences. The sentence and the second sentence, and that's a conjunction. And so in front of the conjunction, you need to put a comma here. And you only use semicolons when you have two complete sentences, but there's no, and those sentences are not connected by a conjunction. Okay, here's one example. After this time, the system rapidly went to a turbulent state. The vortices were gradually destroyed. So again, two complete sentences, but here there's no conjunction here. And in this case, you use a semicolon. And don't use a comma to separate two related phrases that are not complete sentences. Okay, I got another example here. So I have two parallel phrases, and you should not actually use a comma to separate those two parallel phrases. So only use a comma to separate complete sentences connected by a conjunction. Some more points about grammar. And another common problem here is the subject-verb disagreement. And the verb must agree with the number of the nouns. And here I got a couple of examples. The first sentence here, so both the subject and the verb are singular, and they have to be consistent. The second one, both are plural, and they have to be consistent. So subject-verb disagreement is a very common problem, grammar error that the authors committed. And also, so when it's also very important to know how to use the right article. The article can be a, an, or the. And normally, in front of the noun, you need to put an article. And for singular case, you can use an or the, and for plural, you use the. But you have to know what to use and when to use. And there's a lot of problems with the usage of appropriate article in writing. And also you need to be careful with the right preposition, in or and, on, by, and etc. And those sometimes can be difficult. You need to pay particular attention. And the other thing you need to consider is the tense. So when you write up papers, you describe your past experiments or studies people done previously, and sometimes you use present tense, past tense, or perfect tense, and so you need to pay particular attention to the tense that you use. And another important point is that when you're writing those, you need to be consistent. Say you're describing your previous results, you use past tense, and then you need to be consistent. When you're doing the same thing, and you need to use past tense in the same sentence, the same paragraph, section, or entire paper. So it's not a good idea to change back and forth between the usage between present tense, past tense, or perfect tense. So try to keep consistent if possible at all. Clarity. Having a clearly written article can help the review process and also copy editing. And so the point is that you need to avoid being wordy. Use as few words to convey your ideas as needed. So don't try to use complicated languages or phrases. Do as simple as possible. There's a couple of examples here. It is shown in Figure 4 that it's a lot easier if you only use Figure 4 shows that. Another example, a majority of use most due to the fact that simply use because. So write simple language if at possible. Another problem associated with clarity is the usage of the overusage of the pronouns. It, this, that, those, these, And so a lot of times people don't actually have an idea about what you're referring to. And so you actually, it would be a good idea to try to be specific. So it's a lot of time when you're using the pronouns as the subject of a sentence, and you want to make sure people understand what those pronouns refers to. Let me give you one example here. So this was always lesson to me. I don't have a clue here about what this means. It's a pronoun. So this can be anything. Probably it's a quantity, but I don't know about this quantity. So instead, it would be a good idea to use a specific noun. So this arrow was always less than 2 meters. Okay, I know this is not an actual quantity, it's actually the arrow of this quantity. So if you overuse pronouns, you want to make sure and people not get confused. Some other point about clarity is that when you submit papers, you may have to go through several stages of revisions, and there's comments recommended by referees, and like when you do those, and you want to check your paper again to make sure everything is clear, and so there can be a lot of errors introduced in the revision stage. Format. So article formatting can improve the readability and reviewability of the article. So basically you need to have a clear structure for your article, and you can do that by using headings and subheadings. Okay, so for example, your article has abstract, introduction, I would use section 1. Method, I use section heading 2. And in the method section, I may have like experimental techniques, that's 2.1. Numerical methodologies, 2.2. Data sources and certainties, I use like 2.3. So having those headings and subheadings can help to clarify the structure of your article. And also, when you do scientific writing, it's not a good idea to emphasize statements. Okay, so avoid using emphasize, such as to use italics, bold, underline, and place quotes around terms, and those are not a good idea. Okay, and so you don't have to highlight certain statements. So don't use those special emphasize for certain statement that you like to emphasize. And also, when you do scientific writing, you should avoid writing long sentences and also short paragraphs. So I normally consider that a typical sentence is probably like 1 or 2 lines. That's a good. And if the sentence is more than 5 lines, I think the sentence is too long. You need to break up. You need to break this single sentence into several sentences. So it's not a good idea to write long sentences. It's very hard for people to follow. And also, a lot of times people actually write a very short paragraph. So typically, I consider that a good paragraph is more than 5 sentences. It's not a good idea to have a single sentence to constitute a paragraph. And the other thing I'd like to mention is that normally when people write papers, they pay a lot of attention to text, but they actually ignore references, figures, and tables. And make sure you check the clarity for those as well. It's always a good idea to read the author instructions to follow the journal style. And just a couple points for AGU articles, and always use American spellings rather than British spellings. And I don't think AGU encourage people to write footnotes, so if you do have some of those, you need to incorporate those into the text. Abbreviations and acronyms. I think to me, I think I would not use abbreviations or acronyms if I do not repeat those more than 3 times. So if I only use like abbreviation 1 or 2 times, I just write those out. But if you use those very, very commonly, it's a good idea to use abbreviation acronyms. But those need to be defined at the first use, and you only define those the first time you use it. You cannot define those twice. Okay, so you need to figure out whether it's appropriate to use abbreviations or acronyms, and also you need to define those. And always use the international date format, and today is 9 November 2011. That's the international date format. And about quantities, so always add a space between numeral and units of measure, and don't use a dot. And here I got one quantity here, so it's a speed, it's 10 meters per second, and so there's a space. There's a space between the numeral and the unit of measure. And I think AGU will accept both kind of format. So you can either write meter space s-1, or you can write meter/second. So both would be fine. And the point is that those need to be consistent. Okay, so if you're going to use like a meter per second, the entire article, you need to stick to this. And this is not only for speed, this should be for any other units. And the other thing is that you need number equations, the text equations, consecutively throughout the entire article, and those should not be separated by sections. Say it's not a good idea to use like equation 3.1 in the first equation in section 3. But there can be one exception, that is in appendix. So in appendix, you don't have to follow this rule. Some other issues regarding preparation of figures and captions. And when people write captions, and the caption should describe the figure as briefly as possible, so it needs to be very short. And also, you need to know that when you write those figure captions, people would be able to understand the captions without referring to the text. So the figure caption has to be self-contained and has to be brief. So again, concise and informative. So when prepare the text on figures, make sure you label the X's, check the spelling, and that matches the captions and text. Make sure that units of measure are correct. And sometimes people have different panels, and you want to make sure that those are mentioned in the figure captions and also mentioned in the text of the figure. And the other thing you need to be careful is that sometimes people first write out the figure caption and then they just copy the figure caption in the text. So that's not a good idea. Okay, so do not repeat large amounts of text given in the figure caption. So try to minimize duplication between text and figure caption. And also when you draw figures, make sure you don't include caption in the figure. So never do that. And now I have some publication policies from AGU regarding publication in more than 2 languages. I noticed there are quite a few international visitors here at AGU. So AGU does acknowledge the importance for a study published in one language to reach out a broader audience. So AGU permits publication in more than one language. But the important point is that when authors are submitting those papers, and they need to make it very, very clear to the editors. Okay, they need to declare this publication in 2 different language issues, because a lot of times there may be copyright issues, and different publishers may have different policies, so it may or may not be permissible. So the editor will make the determination whether this publication is accepted by AGU. Dual publication is prohibited by AGU. So you cannot publish. So here are some examples. Publishing basically the same study in 2 or more places. So that is considered as dual publication. That's not allowed by AGU. So forms that constitute public distribution or publication include scientific journals. So any of the scientific journals, the contents published there cannot be reconsidered for publication by AGU. And also books, series issued by a publisher, unclassified government documents, and etc. in print and or electronic form. Those are some of the guidelines from AGU regarding dual publication. And some other times, copying large portion of your own past publication into a new article or study, that's also being considered as dual publication. That's not permitted. However, there are certain exceptions. So books of short abstract are given only to attendees at a meeting that are not usually considered published. You come to AGU Fall Meeting, you submit an abstract, and that being distributed, and AGU does not consider that as a dual publication. And also reports and similar works provided to a very limited defined distribution list are not usually considered published. Okay, so those are some of the guidelines from AGU regarding dual publication. AGU consider plagiarism as a very serious scientific misconduct. That's not permitted. And this is the definition about plagiarism. The unauthorized or close imitation of the language and thoughts of another author and the representation of them as one's own original work. So that is called plagiarism. Here are some examples. So you use text, figures, tables, etc. from another source, another author, without permission or acknowledgement of the original source. That is considered plagiarism. So taking information published not only by others and also by yourself. Okay, you published some papers previously, say I just use the same information, and that is referred as self-plagiarism. And also copying ideas and changing the wording of the text or colors, patterns in the figure without giving credit is still plagiarism. But those are some of the AGU statement about plagiarism. One thing I'd like to alert you is that AGU recently implemented a software called cross-check. So all the incoming submissions to AGU journals are checked by the software. So normally the software will provide similarities, like what percentage similarities of your paper to any of the previously journal papers or online publications or whatever. So AGU does implement some software to prevent plagiarism, and if your article is found to have a major, many duplications or similarities with previous publication, and your paper may actually be rejected by the editors. And here are some tips that how people can actually avoid plagiarism. So always give credit to the original source, and when you write a specific word-for-word passage for another source, so in this case you can use quotation marks. And also when you're summarizing the findings from early work in your own words, and still point to the original source to which you refer. For figures, always indicate the original source in the caption. So the general is that you just give people credit when you refer to the previous work. Some other points here, so different publishers have different policy regarding plagiarism, and so you need to find out from those publishers. Okay, some other issues I'd like to discuss here is how do you deal with revisions as when the journal editor receives an article. So what he normally do is he try to identify several experts in your area and then send you a paper for peer review. And the primary function for the referees is that is that they need to advise the editor on the suitability of publishing the results, and also to provide comments to improve your manuscript. So those are the primary functions for referees. So normally referees write, some referees write short comments, some other referees write very, very long comments. And then the editor sends those comments back to you, and he said, hey, your paper perhaps need a minor, major revision. So in that case, you need to provide a point-by-point response to all the comments raised by the referees, everything. And for each point, you need to clearly state your agreement or disagreement with the referee's comments. So like the referee recommended you to modify the figure, you say, hey, we have modified the figure as suggested. There's a typo identified by the referees, typo has been fixed. And also you need to clearly defend or justify your disagreement from the referee's recommendation. Sometimes you disagree with the referee and you write something like, I believe the referee might be mistaken on this particular point, and here's my proof. Okay, so clearly define and justify. And also and the last point here I think is very, very important. Always incorporate your responses to reviewers' recommendation questions in the revised manuscript. A lot of times the referees actually get extremely upset. So the authors write a very, very long response, and none of those responses actually get incorporated into the text. And so the point is that if the referees get confused, if they have arguments, they have questions about a particular point, it's very likely the readers will have the same problem. Okay, and you need to incorporate those responses into the revision as much as possible. So don't just write responses. Think hard how those responses can be incorporated into your text to help you to improve your manuscript. And there are some other issues I got from the copy editors of AGU, and here are some, I think, a very important point. And so you want to make sure you read your paper for clarity and consistency, and also include all the affiliations, the current, the past affiliations, and make sure sections are numbered throughout, and there's at least 2 subheadings per level used. And regarding reference text citations, always use AGU always use bracket, not parentheses, and also italicize author's name. And a lot of times our copy editors have to do this for you and cause delay in publication of your paper. And it's also very important that all references are cited in the text, and all citations has a corresponding reference. Okay, so normally just once you finish out all the paper, print out everything, cross-check everything, make sure it's consistent, and also make sure everything is consistent in the figures and also table references. And that's the thing people normally tend to ignore. So they pay a lot of attention to the text, but not much to figures and tables. And also include latitude and longitude on all maps and in captions and text. And make sure figures are numbered correctly, and also listed on figure sizing checklist. And now, this is also very important. Always check figure for spelling errors. And some other issues, if you are writing an article, use Word file, and when you're working on tables, and make sure you provide tables in a Word table environment. Never copy and paste the figure, the table as a picture or a PDF. It's very, very hard for the copy editor to work on your manuscript in the production stage. And similarly, when you use equations, and you want to use math type, and do not use picture format. It's just impossible for copy editors to work on your equations. And this is another point about I don't use latex, so there are also some considerations here. And also you want to make sure you have permissions before submitting your paper, particularly copyright. And a lot of times our AGU or copy editors, the most important thing that actually causes delay in publication of your article is actually the figures, the images. And sometimes people don't have enough resolution, and they get sent back to the authors and reproduce, and it's a lot of delays caused by that. So if you're working on color figures, so the resolution should be at least 300 to 600 pixel per inch PPI. And if you're working on black and white figure, it should be around, it should be at least 1200 PPI. And also for vector lines, and the thickness of the line should be at least 0.5 points. And when you write labels on figures, AGU, the copy editors, prefer this particular font, Helvetica. So that's a preferred font for making figures because it's readability. And they don't want you to use italic. And also the font size should always be larger than 8 point. And for graphics, so they want you to use a vector graphic EPS, and some other times for photographic or continuous twin images, and they want you to use TIFF and high resolution JPEG. So when I prepare my figures, I normally use like Excel to generate my figures. And I was told that AGU prefers you not export those Excel files into a PPT, PowerPoint file. So the best thing to do is actually save those as PDF. So the copy editor can work on PDF. It's very hard to work on PPT, images or figures. With that, I'm going to stop here and thank you very much for your attention.